The screen there, people. That was a mistake, but that's okay. That's okay. These things happen, and you guys are incredibly gracious. So thank you, guys. You might be a stay-at-home mom whose kids have grown up and you're ready to re-enter the workforce, or maybe you're military and you're getting out, or maybe you are find yourself in Europe and you're no longer to apply the tradecraft and skills that you have developed that has paid for your, your life and your livelihood up until that point. And you need to reinvent yourself, redefine what you are, skill up, and go get after it. And that is exactly what we're talking about today, because our friend Mike Jones, aka the Haunted Hacker, did just this. And his story is absolutely inspiring. He's a wonderful person, and we're going to be getting all up in that story today. And I am so excited. Every time I've spoken with Mike, I've been on his show twice. It has just been so good conversation, so natural, so easy to talk to. Real quick, business, right? I guess whatever they call that, house business. We are doing a practical ethical hacking TCM Academy bundle raffle later today. Thank you to the newly minted PNPT, Russell Brinson, member of the SimplyCyber community. We are also going to be answering your questions live. So if you have a question for us, put a Q in the front of it so we know that it's for us. We do live Q&A. This is a community. This is a live stream. Let's have a ton of fun. All right? Let's get in here and bring Mike up on stage. All right? Let's see you in there. Hey, Mike. How you doing?
Excellent, man. It's great to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much, and thank you for the grace of the snafu at the beginning there, where you're seeing like my behind the scene production YouTube studio.
It's all good.
Yeah. So okay, so for those who don't know Mike, Mike is the Haunted Hacker, and we're going to be getting into his. I would call it a podcast to begin with, but it's so much more than that. It's really a community, and we will get into all of that. But I wanted to start with your story of reinvention and redefining yourself, Mike, because you were an offensive security professional, and then you couldn't practice those skills anymore, and you needed to pivot. And now you're, a quite successful security professional on the defensive side, and it's really impressive. So can you take us back to the start of like the moment that you need to redefine yourself and what your course of action was?
Sure. It was back in 2020, actually 2018. I ended up in Europe and decided to come back for a conference and realized that my passport was no longer valid. So I was kind of stuck in Europe without a way to make money. Couldn't get a job because I wasn't a resident. Tried doing some consulting, very little consulting. And I started speaking and talking, telling my story. And that led to helping kids over in London and in the UK, kids at risk for being cyber criminals. And from there, I got picked up as a CISO for a blockchain company, and left there and eventually was able to come back to the States. And that's where the real reinvention started, is when I got back to the US.
Yeah, well, just before you get on the plane, Mike, and head over to the States, you just mentioned some speaking engagements, and one of the things we talk about in the community is kind of building a brand and sharing the knowledge that you have. How did you, I guess, set up or get those kind of speaking engagements? Because it definitely, I don't know if it helped you get that CISO role, but I would assume it helped you network, which is just so important.
Yeah, absolutely. So the company I was working for before I got stuck in Europe was a security company, and we had met a vendor that sold us an application. And when he found out that I was in Europe, he wanted to take me on a speaking tour. He said, "You've got a great story. Let's make it public." So we start off with the speaking tour inside the mind of a hacker, talking about the psychology of hacking and kind of my story. And that kind of blew up into kind of an all university speaking tour with Cambridge University, Westminster, just a ton of them.
That's awesome. And did that lead to networking opportunities?
Oh, tons. I can't stress how important it is to get involved, not just in the work, but in the community, because that's where you make the real connections. That's where you find the real opportunities.
Yeah, preach. That's I can't say that enough. And the nice thing is, I've been saying it long enough that the opportunities for people have started coming. So now it kind of reinforces and proves it. So I do want to come back to the mindset of a hacker. I didn't know that's what you were speaking about, and that does sound intriguing. But let's get you on the plane and fly you over to the States. So now what? Like, you're still kind of, I would imagine you're still kind of on this reinvention course at this point.
Yeah, reinvent from the ground up. I mean, literally, I was like technically homeless. Um, and it was like the whole process was probably about a year. I spent trying to like get bank accounts and, the normal stuff that people do every day that people take for granted. I had to rebuild that.
Hmm. So, one of the questions I was actually kind of curious about, I thought we might get to it later, but um, how important is like asking for help or having a network in helping you climb into that new role or climb into that new you, frankly, I guess, to put it bluntly.
I mean, everybody needs a network, whether it be a social network or a spiritual network or whatever. Those are the people that you look to guide you and to kind of build your framework. If you don't have that, it's very difficult. Um, and especially getting into cyber, let's talk about that for a second. If you
Hmm.
don't know anybody in the community, it makes things very difficult, just networking in general. And I think that's a challenge for a lot of people. I have Asperger's, and networking in the very beginning was very difficult because I didn't know how to approach people and I didn't know how to, I guess, socialize. But after public speaking and starting to rebuild myself, that became kind of like second nature.
Yeah, I mean, from the conversations I've had with you, you're very you're very comfortable and very natural and engaging. So I don't know if that's something you had to work on or not, but you're killing it. So you have a seriously successful podcast, and that's you speaking mostly. So good on you. Um, so okay, so what other challenges did you encounter? Like, I mean, obviously, I didn't realize that you were basically homeless and having these challenges with basic fundamental things that people take for granted, like having a mailing address. Um, but what were there any challenges that you encountered from like a technical kind of perspective in
So
your path?
sure. So there was, I mean, so I had to decide, was I going to go back to offensive security or defensive? And luckily, Luke McComey, a good friend of mine, gave me an opportunity to interview for a position, and basically I got to choose which way I wanted to go. I could have been on the red team or I could have been on the blue team. I
Mhm.
chose the blue team because I'd done red team for so long. And I wanted to get back to building a team because they had a small team and they needed someone to help grow that team. And since then, I've employed probably about 6 or 7 people. I have interns, and it's really cool to see these interns move from being an intern and learning to actual full-time employees because I like to promote from within. I don't like to go
Mhm.
outside an organization to bring people in. Um, I like to reward people who work hard. So being part of that is excellent, but I also get to still do some of that red team stuff. We've got a great team on the red team side, and I still work in engagements with them when they need help. The last one I did was an Android assessment, which was really cool.
So how valuable? Because this is something that we do talk about quite a bit too.
Mhm.
How valuable was your red skills at making you good at blue?
So my whole career has been a mixture of both. When I got out of the military, my first paid position was on the same compound. Just changed my shirt and went to work, and I was working in the GCCC, which was the basically the SOC for all of the Atlantic Fleet in the Navy. So I cut my teeth on defense, but then went back to my offensive roots after the military and dove off into pen testing. Um, but it's always been a mixture. And I go back to Sun Tzu, where Sun Tzu says, to defeat your enemy, you have to know your enemy. And so I make it a point to tell anybody getting into cyber, you've got to learn both principles. You can't go in blind because if you only learn blue, you're totally blind as to what's causing those events you're looking at, and vice versa.
Hmm. Yeah, Pete McKinnon and I, member of the community, had the same question. I mean, he threw it up like literally as I was spitting it. I guess to the second part of Pete's question, though, I mean, was any of it surprising when you made that, switch to running a blue team and, being really into a SecOps role?
I think the most shocking part of it was the platforms, because I hadn't worked in the platforms for a while, and I was learning new techniques and new technology. That was the only difficult part. But I have a great team behind me too, so they help me get up to speed on certain platforms and the way they do things. Really, it's just learning the environment you're getting into and operations. That was the hardest part. But other than that, I mean, you already know the attacks. You already know what you're looking at. And
Mhm.
it's easier to defend once you know what those attacks are and how they're generated, is the way I look at it.
Yeah, I was talking to a member of the community recently who just started her first blue team job, and
Mhm.
she's super pumped about it and getting drinking from the fire hose. And I was saying, I feel like, personally, because I've done some blue, so I'm not a SecOps guy, but I do blue. At some point, you start seeing it as almost like categories, like
Mhm.
buckets of attack. It's each one. It's like, oh, that's a different flavor, but it's this kind. Like let's do it, and that she would get there. So it is interesting, from your perspective. Now, a question that you made me think of. You said you really enjoy building teams. Another hot topic in the industry right now um, you know, is certifications matter? Is practical experience matter? Is it education? Like when you're building a team, and I don't want to go too far down the road on this topic, but it is so relevant since you build security teams.
Mhm.
What are you looking for? Like what stands out to you? Like what could people take away as like, oh, that's a good idea. I should be doing that.
I go back to my interview with Microsoft back in 2005 and the way they conduct interviews. I don't necessarily look at your certifications or your in-depth knowledge in certain areas. I want to know how you think, how you troubleshoot, how you approach challenges, how creative you are. I can teach somebody security who's very creative and has a really good way of breaking down challenges. It's harder to teach someone who's set in their ways and has been in cybersecurity 20 plus years rather than it is to take somebody with a fresh new outlook and excited and has enthusiasm and faces challenge as well.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. And I appreciate that. I do say a lot of like practical skill, like almost today, like I say practical skills is king. And not really the tech stack necessarily, but your ability to kind of understand like the methodology behind what we're doing here. That's very good. Louis got a question really quick. I haven't even read it, so it could be not suitable for work, Mike. But what about pivoting to security but have IT experience with security path? What would you recommend? So what do you tell the people who work in IT that want to move into cyber?
I always start off, I have an intern right now that's in that same situation. And I always tell them to start off, learning something broad. You're learning defense in a broad length, right? And then diving down, learning a little bit of red at the same time, but never close yourself down to a certain path because that path may change and the industry as a whole may change. So keep your mind open and look at it from an open view and mold your path depending on where you go. I mean, to me, it's a flow thing. I just go with the flow and I pick which path that presents itself and it will present itself.
Okay, interesting. So let's talk about I guess, well, I wanted to go right into Haunted Hacker podcast, but let's go into Haunted Hacker podcast. So
Sure.
between reinventing yourself and getting stood up and having gotten a job and basically started on your way to redemption, like at some point you decided you're going to start a podcast, and it's wildly successful. I'm slightly biased because I've been on it twice. Okay, so full disclosure. Um, but what was the genesis of creating the podcast? And I guess can you go into that a bit and tell us like why and what can people expect from it?
Sure. So I started the podcast. Me and a good friend of mine, Mike LeBlanc, were talking. We're sitting in the kitchen drinking bourbon. And thought he said, you have a story. You have a big story to tell. Why don't you do a podcast? So that's where the idea came from. Um, but it kind of evolved, right? So the first couple episodes was just me talking and goofing off and not taking it really seriously. and having bourbon at the same time, which didn't equate well. But then we moved into more of a guest and host type situation, and I started bringing on people that I knew, people who were OG, who had been in the community for forever, and helped found what we know now as ethical hacking. To leave like a legacy, right? A story for newcomers coming in who might not know those people who helped build what they're in today. So I had people like Chris Roberts on. I had Luke McComey on, people like that. But then I started evolving into, I want to learn different aspects, but different people's point of view. So I started bringing on former FBI, former CIA, NASA, just people who I find interesting. And I really want to dig into the psychology of the way they look at the industry and cybersecurity. And we give, I mean, every podcast I try to give something to the viewers to hang on to, maybe a thought, a provoking thought, or maybe a way to look at something differently. Because I'm definitely not orthodox. I'm not one of the ones who, is going to sugarcoat or put it in a nice and neat framework. It's just going to be genuine talk.
Yeah, and this is where, like, you even just saying that made me like wriggle a little bit of uncomfort, because we were talking before the show just about how I don't want to say conformist I am, but like I'm very structured. I'm like crystal made for GRC CISO kind of thing, and but I love it. It's like, it sounds like what you're doing is kind of like almost like Tribe of Hackers, or like a chronicled, like an audio chronicle of where we are as a community, and the people who compose that community, which isn't always just practitioners, right? Like, for example, I'm thinking like Joe Hudson, who is a cybersecurity recruiter, and he's a great friend of the community, and like all he does is cybersecurity recruiting. Like, he doesn't practice, but he has fingerprints on who we are and what we're doing right now as a community. So I love that, Mike.
Yeah.
So I guess you started with the podcast. Something that I wanted to ask you, okay? So if you haven't listened to Mike's podcasts, it's exactly what he said. It's an interview with someone in the community, and we have a nice, great conversation. It's led by Mike. But one interesting thing about Mike's shows that you don't get here at SimplyCyber, for example, is Mike starts off each episode, as near as I can tell, the ones I've heard, with a kind of a personal update, right? Whether it's like a clinical diagnosis, or something with your cat, or just like something personal about you. And the first time we sat down to record and you did it, I was like, oh, that's interesting. Like, that's interesting. And then the second time, it was like very natural and comforting. Have you like, first of all, why do you do that? And second of all, have you found it connects you to the community in some way?
To be honest with you, Gerald, I really don't know why I do it. It's just habit, I guess. But I don't know how to give like that, I guess, professional interview or professional podcast. It's more, to me, it's more of just organic conversation.
Yeah.
And I try to bring stuff out from people that, people can relate to on a personal level. So in order for me to get people to talk to me on a personal level, I've got to be open and transparent, and kind of, throw bits and pieces about myself out there. And, it's a way for me to feel like I'm in touch, I guess, but it's not something I've ever like, this is what I need to do. It's just habit, I guess.
Yeah, no, and it's funny you say that, because like I said, it's very personal. I mean, it's not like, Jerry, can you look at this? Does this look like a rash or something? It's not that personal, but it really does kind of initiate the conversation with you giving something to the guest member in almost in like a subconscious way. It causes this kind of like tit for tat, quid pro quo thing, which I really do think unlocks deeper conversations. So it's a technique that I find awesome. And maybe on my morning shows I'll start doing something like that. But I do appreciate it, Mike. I was just curious if there was some like deeper logic behind it, some red team mindset behind it, where you were hacking me and I didn't even realize it.
No, it's just me.
Yeah, I love it. We got a question from Jax, friend of the show and member of the squad. Thanks for the support, Jax. Can you think of a time, Mike, during your struggles when you had a significant success that thrusted you into the current space for future success?
To be honest with you, I think that came when I was over in Europe, when I spoke at Cambridge University about the psychology of being a hacker. And from there, it's like there was several doctors that were attending the talk, and it was a physical talk at the university. And when I heard Cambridge, I thought, oh wow, that's a big university, that's a big thing. Um, and from that point on, it was like people there who knew other people who knew other people took me down this path of talking in front of 40 people to talking in front of 1,000 people. And not necessarily about my background, but just about hacking, the psychology, the human aspect of it. Because I think as an industry, we don't focus enough on the human aspect of security. So I think that's where it really blew up.
Well, so that's the second time you've talked about kind of the mindset of offensive security, and we had a question from Kayla in here about, how do you know where to focus when you're learning techniques and tools and stuff like that. So can you, I guess, kind of speak a little bit about what is the mindset of a hacker, and is it different than a different type of cybersecurity professional, or is it a cybersecurity professional mindset?
So for me, the mindset is more of a lifestyle. It's not so much a learned or I guess a discipline. It's more of that's just the way my mind works. And that's, when I talk about hiring people and the creativity and approaching challenges, my mindset is if there's a problem or if I want to, do this hack that I saw that's very complex, I literally won't sleep until I get it done. I want to have that, I guess, that success, that fulfillment, and I move on to the next challenge. And sometimes this takes me down rabbit holes of exploits and different techniques for hours, sometimes 3 or 4 in the morning. But I'm always learning something new. It's not because I feel like I have to. It's just the way my mind works. Like I want more information.
Yeah. So with the Haunted Hacker, I know you have the podcast, right? But you have so much more than that. I know you have an incredible Discord community. You've got some other, related tangential things going on. Can you share with us, I guess, kind of like what Haunted Hacker is today and where it's going tomorrow, and how the community gets involved with that, so they can help, this continued reinvention, if you will, of who you are and what the community is, of course.
Sure. When I first started the community, it was very open, which kind of left me open to attack, if you will. So we had to lock some things down, and just like any other group that is in the red space, there's always that threat or that possibility. So I had to lock it down, and then we started growing from there. We came up with the magazine. The podcast got picked up by Techstrong TV, where it broadcasts 3 times a week, and now that has put me on Techstrong speaking tours. And then there's just so many things that have come out of it. Kim has helped move it to a different area as well with, you know, the magazine, with reaching out to new guests. We have merchandise. I mean, none of this was thought of in the beginning. I didn't sit down and go, this is where I want to be, and this is how I'm going to get there. It was more of, let's just see what happens, and let it take the life that it's going to take. Um, and it has. There's been ups and downs, and there's been challenges. But one thing that I decided I wasn't going to do is I wasn't going to quit.
Yeah. So I mean, what's, I guess, I don't know if you envision getting picked up and essentially kind of syndicated or not, but what are some, like, big plan, like, down the road? What are you thinking? I mean, are you thinking, I guess, like, I don't know, a haunted hacker conference, I guess I'm curious. I mean, you have really interesting ideas.
So I have thought about a conference, and I've been talking to a couple people, and I know that virtual conferences are the thing because of COVID. But we want to take it one step further and make it a virtual reality conference with
Oh,
Oculus.
okay.
Um, so I'm talking to some designers and some people that I work with, and we're trying to come up with ways and ideas and map this out. But that's where we want to go. Um, as far as the group, I never intended to get syndicated, but once I got syndicated, that became like a real passion for me, because knowing that not only the people who subscribe to my channel, but also about 10,000 viewers 3 times a week gets to watch the same podcast we do on TechStrong. That was a real big moment for me when TechStrong picked us up. And they've become like a second family. But eventually down the road, right now I'm trying to make 1,000 subscribers on YouTube, just so I can start finding a way to monetize certain parts of it. We all know that podcasts are not free, that, it takes money to put this stuff together. I can't even imagine what you pay, but
there are some associated costs. Yeah.
Right. So I'd like to be self-sustaining, right? And have the podcast kind of pay for itself rather than out of my pocket.
Yeah, I'm gonna pull it up and pump it in a second here,
Sure.
because I do think it is awesome. Yeah, you're close here. Yeah, please continue. I'm sorry.
Oh,
I didn't mean to interrupt you just to not say anything. Like,
no worries, no worries. But yeah, like as far as future plans go, I'd like to see the community grow. But to me, it's really up to the community. I gave us, the place to start, and I've given the group the tools to work with, and it's up to them where they want to take it. I don't mind driving the bus, but tell me where we're going, type deal. So I just let it go on its own.
Yeah, I just dropped a link in chat, at least to YouTube folks. Definitely go check out Mike's YouTube channel and subscribe if you haven't already. You can see here clear evidence that I am subscribed and support Haunted Hacker. I do love the conversations you're having. I don't get to listen to as many as I wish I could, but I do get to listen to the ones that I do have time for. So I like the Meta conference. What was the idea behind that? Was it just to be different, or what? I guess what was the idea?
The idea came from DEF CON. And, a lot of people miss those meetings at DEF CON, miss the lock picking, miss all of that. But there's a lot of people who don't want to subject themselves to the possibility of getting sick. And I, for one, am one of those people. I've had COVID 3 times, don't want it again. So we thought, how can we do this in a way that people can interact and actually do some of these village challenges and interact with people? And it went back to games like Destiny and some of the earlier games, back in the day when they first came out with the virtual kind of environment. And we thought, hey, if we could do this and pull it off and have people interacting through Oculus in an environment that we built and these different villages can build, I mean, how cool would that be? So it's a far shot, but we're working towards it, trying to make it happen.
Yeah, I mean, I have no idea or background or network in any way, but my initial thought goes to like Facebook is pushing so hard for metaverse, and they just released like workspaces or spatial or whatever, like these environments where people can move. And like, this is a perfect use case. Like, you could probably get funding. Like, you might get some blowback from the community about getting in bed with Facebook, but that's a separate thing. But like, you could probably get it like funded by them, because it's such a great use case, and it would totally be a justified, like it would demonstrate applicability and utility of the Meta. I do have an Oculus too, just to be transparent and clear. I do think it's awesome, but I don't use it as often as I do want to, because it kind of, I don't know if you have one, Mike, but basically when you put it on, it's like no one else is in the room. Like, you're in a virtual room with everybody else, but like your kids and your wife, they're not in there. And it's slightly off-putting for other people and for myself. I'm like, oh, hey, like I just got done with work, I'm just going to throw on this headset and ignore you. Like, so I don't do that very, very much.
I've seen some really cool videos of people with Oculus running into a wall.
Yeah. I saw one just yesterday about it was like a grandma or someone who's not really familiar, and like, a child walks by and she just like punches the child in the back of the head. So yeah, there are some best practices with using it. So, Mike, one of the things that you did talk about with this group that you just got set up with, I'm sorry, what's the name? TechStrong?
TechStrong.
Yeah, this group you just talked about is something that's quite popular at the beginning of every year. Predictions for 2022. I've actually done some. We talked about a couple on your podcast when I came on. Where, like, specifically, where do you think cybercrime is going?
So cybercrime is going in a direction where I believe it's going to become more geopolitical. We've seen it already, and look at the tensions with Russia and Ukraine and the U.S., China and Taiwan, U.S. and Cuba. And people, there's nationalist groups, not necessarily APTs, but nationalist hacking groups that support their country. And it just lights fuel for the fire. And I've seen ransomware groups working with APTs recently that, it's going in a direction that we definitely don't want it to go, but I don't think there's any way to stop it per se. I think that it's on its own path.
Yeah. Well, to be honest with you, I'm actually surprised that um, not APTs, but like more organized, more national groups, right, aren't doing more financial attacks. I was actually thinking about this earlier today for some odd reason. Like I'm at a stoplight and it just dropped in my head. Like as far as I know, and this, if you don't want to get into this, this is fine. But like as far as in chat, if you don't want to hear this, let us know and we'll change topics. Like as far as I know, North Korea is really the only country that's like overtly has a financial faction that's their job is to go get money, right? Lazarus Group is what they call them. And that's what they do. And you don't see other countries really doing that. And I was thinking, ransomware is rampant. You see all these, cyber criminal organizations now. They may have, state-sponsored backing or endorsement, or we won't bother you. But for the most part, it's just like thugs and gangs and mafiosos that are essentially committing these ransomware crimes, the financial ones, and the nation ones are not. And I was thinking, I wonder if it's because, like, if you touch my bank account, I'm going to flip out. Like, I'm willing for you to mess with my people, but if you touch my bank account, i.e., like our economy or Federal Reserve or something, it's going to be all out war. And I guess, do you have any thoughts on that? This isn't a fully fleshed out thought. It's just an observation that you don't see it happening except North Korea.
So I had a guy on the show, Mark Elliott, who's former CIA, and we talked about this topic. And I had a theory that ransomware groups were going to start working with APT groups, and I've seen it. I've seen it firsthand. I've seen attacks where we go into a network to do forensics, and there's an APT and a ransomware group. So they do work together. One thing that you should watch is the next time we put sanctions on a country, let's say China, and watch the attacks on the blockchain. Watch the attacks on crypto wallets. When we put financial sanctions on countries, that's the first thing to do is run the blockchain and start stealing crypto.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, and I think, at least the Bangladeshi bank heist, you can tie chronologically to economic sanctions placed on North Korea when they were doing their weapons program.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, that is interesting. Mike, I got a question for you from the audience. And I know a little bit about this background, but I'm curious on your thoughts, how you might talk to someone in your community about this. So Jess is a member of our community. She's a great professional. Mm-hmm. And, basically she had, a network connection. She helped out. She was kind of told one thing and it turned out to be a lie, for lack of a better term, and got duped. And now she's a little gun shy. Like she's touched the stove and got burned, and now she thinks that the stove is always on, whether or not it's on or off. Right. When someone burns you in your network, how would you proceed, or what might you tell someone like Jess in this case?
Persona non grata, gone. And that happens all the time in this industry. This industry is a great industry, and Jess is a fantastic person. Jess has been in my Discord and listen to the podcast. She's awesome. But I guess I have an advantage because I expect those things to happen. Being from the red side traditionally, and going through those battles between groups and battles between people, even in the Haunted Hacker, I've seen it, and just expect it. And it's okay to be a little bit paranoid about what's going on around you, because that makes you more alert, more aware.
Maxwell follows up on Jess's question with, okay, so be alert, be on the lookout. What are the red flags? What might be something?
Well, for me, just watching so let me reverse that a little bit. Coming from a background where I had that social anxiety and that social, I guess, diversity, I tend to sit back and watch people and watch how they conduct themselves, and I see a rhythm. And then when that rhythm gets disrupted or they do something out of the norm, then the red flags go up, no matter how small it is. It may be something minute, like, not approaching me the same way they always approach me, or not attending something that they normally attend. That throws up the red flags. And then usually I start putting the picture together. And coming from an intelligence background, I have, that's second nature, is to start putting the pieces where they belong, and you see the bigger picture pretty quick. But for people that are worried about that type of stuff, I would say do more listening and do less acting. So sit back, let them come to you, watch what goes on in your environment. When that environment changes, naturally, you're going to feel different. Listen to that feeling.
Wow, excellent. That's excellent information. Thanks, Mike. That's something to like put in your pocket and just save for in general, like for really life, right? I mean, that's not just cybersecurity. That's not just professionalism. That's like a life lesson kind of thing. Like Pete loves your analysis. So that is awesome. So I want to spend a minute talking about your hobbies, right? Like, so you're big on 3D printing, right? I've seen all over your social media your 3D printing. I'm curious, like when you get into something like 3D printing, in your mindset, I mean, is your first thought to hack it? Or what do you like? I guess kind of tell me a little bit about 3D printing. I know this is a cybersecurity focused podcast, but a little bit about 3D printing, and then maybe how you may have gotten into it, or how your mind works when you get a piece of technology.
So the first thing I did when I got my 3D printer, I literally haven't had it but maybe 2 weeks. So the first thing I look at is, how can I control this remotely? So I downloaded an application called Octoprint, and I run it on a Raspberry Pi, and it controls everything from temperature to the bed temperature to the speed of the printing. And I just look at ways to make that one printer to make it better and perform the way that I want to perform. And find ways to change things that aren't supposed to be changed, and try to find ways to do things better. But what really got me interested in it, my boss at work got one for Christmas, and seeing the things that he did with his, I was like, I've been wanting one since they came out. Back in the day, they were like $10,000 a piece, and now the Ender 3 version 2 that I have is only $250. So at that point, I couldn't deny it. I had to get it.
I love it. Yeah. I mean, so I do appreciate it. And like, it's something that I like to convey to people who are like, oh, like, I don't know, like, do you want to work in cybersecurity? Yes. Okay. Well, what do you want to do? That's like the next question always. And they say, I don't know. And there isn't like, I forget what my military people are going to know it. You probably know it, Mike. There's some test you take that'll tell you like where you're supposed to. Yeah, HASFAB. Well, there isn't one as far as I know for cybersecurity. So it's kind of like, well, if you like this, you might like that. I really like to tell people like what Mike's talking about right now with that mindset. Like when you get a new piece of technology, and your immediate thought is, how can I engineer this differently, or how can I do something to make it do something it wasn't designed for, or how can I make it automated in some capacity? Like that like taking it apart and making it do something, that is a hacker. That's a hacker. Like, point blank, that's a hacker. And you can call it different names, but when you're trying to think of how to do something that it's not been designed for, that is the quintessential essence of a hacker, in my opinion.
Yeah, true. We're all born hackers too. I mean, from the time you're a child, learning new things, learning how to walk, learning how to manipulate objects, that's a hacker. And just some of us continue down that path, and others go the conformed route, and they just follow what everybody else does.
Yeah. And you know what? It's funny you say that we're born that way, because I swear to God, the best social engineers are children, because they haven't been conditioned to know what is socially acceptable, and what you'll get. Basically, someone will push back on you when you're an adult. But think about social engineering children. I have two children. They'll be like, "Oh, can I get ice cream?" No. Well, how about no? Can I get 2 scoops ice cream? No. Well, how about one? Well, no. Like, what if I go get it and scoop one? Does that work? Or what if we both have ice cream? Can we both have ice cream? So like trying to like win me over now. And my kids are, excellent at it. Either that or I'm a soft target, Mike. But if you think about the way children get things the way they want it, they are expert social engineers.
100%.
Yeah. So we talked a little bit about where cybercrime's going to kind of flip the script a little bit, especially since you are, a high-ranking member in an MDR environment. What are organizations getting wrong about information security? Why do they suck?
This is a part that makes life difficult and makes it difficult to continue down a certain path, right? Because every incident that I've responded to and every major, I guess, breach that I've participated in, it's never a 0 day. It's never something really cool or complex. It's always something really dumb, like, oh, I didn't know that server was out there, or oh, I forgot to patch my Exchange server. Proxy shell in the last, I don't know, 60 days has been like a cancer that spread all over the world. And every breach I've seen has something to do with proxy shell. And then they start talking about log4j. And it's not the complex attacks, it's patching. And it's the things we've preached about since the beginning of cybersecurity. Like, that has not changed.
Yeah, it's sad but true, and I almost feel like it's like I can't think of the word right now, but basically like rendered commonplace because of frequent usage. Hackneyed, that's the word I was looking for. It's almost hackneyed to say like, why would a threat actor, an APT, anyone, why would they burn a 0 day if they literally can just point Metasploit at you and hit like go? Like they're not doing it for style points, right? That they're acting on objective.
Right. And they're gaining the access they want and they need, but half the time they're just walking through an open door.
Yeah. It really is sad. I'm going to tease it at the end of the show, but next week's episode is literally called "You Can't Patch All the Things," and it's about what to do. Because in reality, like it's so easy. That's another like myth or misunderstanding about our industry. And by the way, this is a best practice for anyone that is a pen tester or an aspiring pen tester. Like if you just say patch your stuff, like it's not going to end well for you, because in reality you cannot patch all things, right? There's critical apps that don't work on Windows 7. They only work on Windows XP or Windows 11, right? Like if you want to, because Windows 7 is obviously, but there's those things. There's custom embedded XP on a manufacturing system that costs $4 million that, guess what? There's no way they're going to replace it because you told them that it's got a vulnerability, right? They don't care. Like the business doesn't care. So, and another one I think of too, Mike, that's a really great example. Brandon Poole, a friend of the show, came on and he mentioned this one to me either on or off air. But if you remember Equifax, right? Mm-hmm. Equifax had this massive breach and it was Java struts. And it was externally facing, and they knew it was vulnerable. And the CEO of Equifax got fired because of negligence and all this other stuff. And the thing is, you couldn't patch it. Like if you patched it to the next level, it would have had this cascading effect of breaking everything underneath it that had been custom made, which is a problem unto itself. That's technical debt. But you can't patch all the things. So I'm not surprised that attack surface is so juicy. So another question that I want to ask, because this came on stream a while ago, and Neil Bridges actually had a really strong point about this. Have you ever in your red offensive days or in your defensive days, have you ever used a buffer overflow to like in actual practice? Like, have you done that?
Absolutely, 100%. Yeah.
Okay.
Back MS 1017, I believe, or something like that. The LSAS buffer overflow. Absolutely.
Okay. Because there was a observation made that, like, buffer overflow is kind of the first OffSec, advanced thing you learn, but how often do you really use it in practice? But I'm gonna mark tape right here and say that it has application.
It does. Absolutely.
Pete's got a question for you, Mike, and then we're going to roll into 5 questions. Is there a way to talk to people about fundamentals that you guys have developed over your careers?
Yeah.
So I'm assuming he's talking about talking to the business, perhaps.
Yeah. So the way that I approach that conversation, in the past when I was young, I would go in and guns blaring and, you do this wrong, this vulnerability, this server's vulnerable. What are you doing? You need to do this, and it didn't work. You don't build rapport that way. So I go in and give them the data, but 9 times out of 10, it's not the person you're talking to's fault that they're vulnerable. So my job is to show them how they're vulnerable and help them find a way to not be vulnerable. And it doesn't, like the phishing campaigns. I hate those because it's, it gets people kind of numb to email in general. They don't know what to click on, what not to click on. And they always get indicated as, oh, they fell for it. Well, instead of making it like such a negative connotation, why don't we do it like a positive and offer like a prize in the industry or prize in the company for a person who doesn't fall for, the phishing attack 2 or 3 times in a row? Why does it always have to be negative?
Yeah, for me, the number one way that I have found to talk to people about fundamentals is to personalize it. So instead of saying, you need multi-factor authentication, and we're going to put multi-factor authentication in. I know it's going to be disruptive. If you've ever deployed multi-factor at an organization, it's incredibly disruptive. People don't like it. It's a pain in the ass. I tell them, I don't tell them that we're putting multi-factor in. I basically will make video or go speak to them, and I'll say, hey, listen, you need like this thing called multi-factor is going to keep from having your checking account emptied. Period. Like, unless you're open to being robbed, like there's a control here. I don't say control, but there's a control here that you can use that's free and the bank provides it and it can keep you from getting cleared out. Because I know, Carl, that you use the same password on all your systems. We all know it. So just put multi-factor on and you won't get robbed, man. And then once Carl puts it on his phone and he thanks me for helping him not get robbed, I say, oh, and by the way, we're going to put the same one on your email because, we can't have people busting into your email, Carl. So I try to use personalization and showing them the value to them personally. So then you basically reinforce that behavior.
Yeah, it's a teaching opportunity too. I look at everything like that as a teaching opportunity.
Love it. I'm going to set up the raffle. Are you okay with the giveaway now, Mike?
Absolutely.
Awesome. All right. And thanks for all the great questions, guys. We're going to do the 5-question segment right now, and then we'll do a couple more questions, and then we'll thank Mike for all his time. So if you want to enter the raffle right now, #squad, drop that in chat, and you will enter. We are playing for a practical ethical hacking from TCM Academy course, compliments of Russell Brinson, SimplyCyber community member, and freshly minted PNPT, which is the new hot cert on the block. And he got that earlier today like a boss. Congrats. So, yeah, absolutely. Let me play it. Like, hold on. Is that? No, wait, that's the wrong one. This is what he gets. All right, like a boss. Okay, so while those things queue up, we're going to play our 5-question segment. I don't have special buzzers, Mike. I've got a lot going on. Normally, I make custom buzzers for my guests, but we'll use some popular ones that have been used on the channel. So obviously, the first one. Okay, first question for you, Mike. Okay. Red is seen as the sexy side. I asked this to all kind of my OffSec people. Red is seen as the sexy side of information security. Do you think it's sexy?
It's not as sexy as you would like it to be. No.
Yeah. Okay. Why is that? What's the ugly truth?
The ugly truth is there's a lot of reporting and the results are almost identical every time.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, that is bad. I've just been told by my mod, by the way, thank you very much, Base, for modding, that the buzzers are not coming through. Mike, do you hear the buzzers when I play them?
I don't.
Oh, man. I think earlier you said, oh, yeah.
I did.
Yeah, cool. Like,
yeah.
What are you doing, man? Are you like hacking?
I don't hear it now.
Oh, my God. Okay. Hold on. This, I'm going to spend 1 second trying to fix this. Okay. Whatever. So we have buzzer options that are not happening right now. And it's sad. It's sad because the buzzer options are the best part of 5 questions. Okay. So I'll just I'll just make a sound effect. I guess. I don't know. So, all right. So next question, again, yeah, reporting's the rough truth of Red. Mike, do you have any comical hacking engagements that you can share? Like, like something that's just, a party, a cocktail party story where you're just like, oh, you wouldn't believe.
100%. So I was doing a pen test on a casino in the Midwest, and I went into the administrator's office and was just getting set up. And I had left my land turtle sitting on the counter along with my bad USB. And when I came back, he had plugged in the land turtle into his laptop, and all of his credentials were grabbed. Everything was sucked out. And when I came back in the room, he goes, "Why did you leave this piece of here? It doesn't work." And I was like, oh, really? So I had all the credentials and domain admin before I even booted up my laptop.
Wow, yeah. So you didn't even have to put like Bitcoin wallet or nudes like on the USB drive?
Nothing.
Wow, awesome. Yeah, that is pretty good. Okay, like I really wish I had sound effects, people. I'm desperately sorry, but I feel compelled to make sound effects up just for the segment. Okay, third question, Mike.
Mm-hmm.
Should businesses, organizations hack back?
Yes. I think that it's about time that we take offensive actions towards groups like that. It doesn't work to lay over and play dead. We definitely have to do something about that, or they won't stop.
So okay, so if you move forward with the philosophy of hackback is acceptable, would organizations employ offensive like soldiers, essentially like mercenaries, or like allow their infosec team to just go for it?
Well, we have paramilitary in the military that help out in times of crisis or whatever. Why can't we have the same in our industry? Why can't we have kind of a paramilitary group that goes in and disables infrastructure?
Yeah. Well, we saw it recently, kind of, where the FBI patched everybody's servers like proactively. Like, thanks, I guess.
I'd be in jail for that.
Is what. Yeah, exactly. That is one way to do it. Okay, so like a boss. Okay, like I got to do these sound effects, Mike. Next question, fourth question. Are you an advocate of bug bounty programs or bug bounty platforms?
Absolutely. I think it gives the people coming into the industry that, especially the young kids, like as young as 14, are winning some of these bug bounties and getting CVEs attached to their names. I think it's good for the industry, and I think it helps people getting into the industry. It helps them get a leg up and have some kind of experience behind them.
Yeah, I like it too. There is some discussion in some circles about, if I submit a bug that I found, which would essentially be a 0-day to a platform, then they are responsible for going with it, but they hold that 0-day for some period of time before they disclose it to the vendor. And there are some like HackerOne's obviously a huge one in bug crowd. They're not going to shoot themselves in the foot, but you could make the argument that there is some gray area that you got to be careful with in that space.
For sure.
Okay, final question. Like, I'm a crypto evangelist. I love it. That's another one of my buzzer options, Mike. And that's the final one. And I'm literally clowning myself for my community here.
I love it.
So, okay, Mike, what is, here's another one I like to ask people. What is like your go-to InfoSec tool? Like what's a well-worn tool in your toolbox?
Right now, I would have to say that Intelligence X is probably one of my go-to tools when it comes to red teaming and incident response as well. Because with Intelligence X, I can put in a domain or an email address or a company name, and it'll show me all the dumps that their information's in. I can go and look and see what was dumped, username, passwords, IP addresses, whatever.
Is this it?
Yeah, that's it.
Cool. Yeah, I will bookmark that and go back to that later. Thanks for that tip, Mike.
You're welcome.
Okay. All right. And so concludes our 5 questions with Mike. Right? Like that will never happen again. I will do a sound check.
I love it.
I will do a sound check. I can't believe you said in the green room.
Dude, it was working in the green room.
Oh, was it? Oh,
yeah.
Okay. I thought you were just punking me. Okay. All right. So let's draw our winners. I can't do the drum roll, people. I guess I'll have to do that as well. We got 25 people enrolled. This is for the Practical Ethical Hacking course from TCM Academy. So good luck to everybody.
Mike Jones.
Congratulations, Chip Harris. Very nice. Very nice. Chip, go ahead and connect with me on Discord or on LinkedIn, and I'll connect you to get what you need to win that prize. So thank you for playing along, and this entire group. Thank you for the grace of allowing me to make my sound effects on the fly. Yeah, I see for ADA compliance, Pete was doing the sound of the drum roll. Thank you, Pete. I love it. So one of the questions that we came up earlier, and I thought it was interesting, going back to kind of geopolitical and the national when we were talking about that, Mike, Dylan said, any thoughts on geopolitical tensions that spill over into the private sector? And I think that this is a really important topic, especially as we move forward as a society, frankly. Do you have any thoughts around this?
I do, and I'm actually going to do an entire episode over geopolitical effects on cybersecurity with a former CIA. So what we're seeing right now is geopolitical tension that is forcing attackers to target transportation, logistics, and food supply. I've seen attacks on all three in the last 60 days. And anytime that a country looks as if they're struggling internally, those are the first three things to be affected. Because if they can cut logistics and transportation, they can't get the food or the supply from farm to market, which puts things in a crisis mode. And with just those three sectors, you can shut down an entire country. And we all know that supply chain is suffering right now as it is. So we're at a very critical breaking point. So I would look for more probes and more attacks to those specific critical infrastructures.
That is interesting. Just as a shameless plug, because it ties in unbelievably, the cybersecurity threat briefing that I do every single morning, tomorrow at 8 a.m. Be sure to check it out. We just talked about it today, today, that the European Union is launching a multi-country cyber attack simulation on supply chain that will run 6 weeks starting tomorrow, which I don't know about you, Mike, but I hadn't heard about that. That's like a massive operation to just like, tomorrow we're doing this.
Yeah. I mean, it's been in the works. It's been in the works for a while, but I don't think it was led to the public until just recently.
Yeah. So it is interesting. What were those three sectors again? You said transportation?
Transportation, logistics, and food supply.
Logistics and food supply. That's so interesting, Mike, because when I talk about this, like I literally talk about this at the university I teach at, there's a lecture I give, and I talk about attacking critical infrastructure and why the US is like focused on protecting it. And I often talk about the economic sector and the energy sector being the two that would go down first if a cyber attack was to be perpetrated. And because people are going to lose their mind when the financials are going buck wild the way that they did in the Great Depression. And with oil and gas or energy, we just saw with Colonial Pipeline, like it was like a sniff of a problem, and people are like losing their mind, gas line fill-ups, putting gas in plastic bags. So I always gravitated to those two industries. I find your logic sound. So I'm not saying like I disagree with you. I find your logic sound, but I hadn't considered that particular consequence of attacking transportation.
So there's a differentiator in those industries, right? The ones you listed, the ones I talked about, is if you go after the grids in the U.S., there's 5. If you go after the power grids and you go after, let's say, the Federal Reserve, those are going to be acts of war. Yeah. As opposed to if you go after a major trucking company that is responsible for food supply, that you can kind of bury that for a while. But an outright blatant attack on those two that you mentioned would attract government attention immediately.
Just, I guess, like to your point, the way it did in Colonial Pipeline, because that's the only time I've seen the federal government step in immediately and somehow get the money back, which doesn't happen. Yeah, Kimberly's talking about food shortages down there in South Florida right now. So, hopefully it's just a coincidence and not, red flags or indicators of compromise. One other question that I want to get to, because, and I'll pull it up here in a second, but Wayne Shaw has been asking this question in chat for like 4 days, and I always see it, Wayne, and it just hasn't come up. So this is your time to shine, brother. So, Mike, what are your thoughts? Quantum computing right down the corner, or right around the corner. What do you think about it? Do you think it's real, that we need to be concerned about it? And what would you recommend for preparation?
I would say that we need to be concerned about it, A, but also be excited about it, B. Reason for being concerned is if it gets to the wrong hands too quickly. Just like nuclear arsenal or supersonic weapons, we got kind of shocked when North Korea started playing with those. So quantum computing, great when you look at how far and how fast we can move in advancing technology once we get to that point. I mean, AI would be something that would be short vision. But if it gets in the wrong hands, then, it could switch the weight and the precedence of the countries in the world.
Yeah, definitely. Like, I feel like everybody kind of focuses just on crypto and breaking crypto, or breaking cryptography. I know some people in the know like don't like the word crypto, but you know what I'm saying? Like be able to crack AES and stuff like that. But you bring up AI, machine learning, and all the powers of that. So I think it's like any other technology, right? Like the internet, you could have argued back in the 60s that, like once people realized how powerful it could be, that, if a country had this, it would be crazy. And now look at it. It's like, I get dog food sent to my house over the internet.
Look at the mass surveillance that came with it too.
Well, yeah, there is that. Maybe you can come back on, and we could have a more of a privacy focused episode, because there's a lot going on with privacy, really across the world, right? I mean, we could have a conversation just about a specific country or two, but maybe we'll bring you back on. I'll pull the community. I'm sure that they would love to have you on. Of course, the community is probably going to want me to do these sound effects myself every week going forward, but we'll see that. So thanks for the question, Wayne and Mike. Really appreciate you having you on. Let me give you an opportunity to take the floor, share your final thoughts with the community. Genuinely appreciate your time with us. Mike, please take the floor.
Sure, man. I really appreciate being here, Gerald. We always have great conversations. And as far as the community goes, be nice to each other. We're all in it together. And there is no difference between red and blue, just a different way of thinking. But, try to embrace every situation you run into with an open mind. And, you learn more that way, and just stay safe.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike, so much. It can't be understated, or excuse me, it can't be overstated enough that at the end of the day, we all are humans. We all are emotional. We are all vulnerable. And, it takes a village, right? Which is why having a community is so valuable and so comforting, and a support system, whether it's, people in Discord or your family or your friend circle, whatever. It is critically important for mental health and just for, moving forward, right?
100%.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much, Mike. Let me send you to the green room, and then I'm gonna tease all the upcoming events here. So thanks so much for joining us, Mike. All right. So I kind of cut him off there. I'm sorry, Mike, about that. But let me just tease you guys a couple things. We've been talking about first things first. If you guys don't know, this is that morning daily briefing that I do. People seem to really enjoy it. I certainly enjoy it. Tomorrow morning at 8 a.m., a live stream on SimplyCyber. So if you're watching this, you found it. We're going to go through the top news stories of the day. And after each one, I give my professional opinion, reflection, how you might be able to weaponize it. Geez, how you might be able to operationalize it at your organization. Definitely don't say you're weaponizing stuff when you're talking to the CIO. It's a good time. I drink coffee, bring tea, whatever you want. It gets you set up for the day. I also want to tease next week's event. We talked about patching and why you can't patch all the things. Dave Klein, who I've been working with on and off for a couple months, we've been talking about patching, why you can't patch things, what CVSS score is. And really, as you can see by the little message up in the top left there, at the end of the day, you need to prioritize your vulnerabilities. Do you even need to patch this? Is it critical? Like, come in on the weekend. Mike talked about proxy shell, right? Like, what is the deal? Because you can't do it all. Okay. We're going to talk to him about how to do that and give you kind of some skills to take away with you in being able to do that. All right, y'all. So that is going to do it. I'd play my outro music, but I can't sing. I can't play it from the stream deck, and I can't sing and say goodbye and thank you to all of you at the same time. I'm sure there's plenty of captured animated GIFs of me dancing like a fool. So I love it. I appreciate you guys. Everybody be good. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being a great audience as you always are. And we will see you tomorrow at 8 a.m. Cheers, everybody.